In terms of an overview of the aid program, I mean, most people might realise that the objective of the Australian aid program is to reduce poverty and promote sustainable development in line with Australia's national interest. The total budget this year is $3.7 billion, or 3.32% of gross national income, a little bit up from Minar's graph, and it's up from $3.2 billion in 2007-08. In terms of the geographic focus, we're heavily concentrated in the Asia-Pacific. That's our backyard, that's what we know, and I think that's where our interests lie too more broadly. Indonesia is now the largest recipient of Australian aid, overtaking the long-time leader Papua New Guinea 2 years ago, with about $462 million programmed annually. PNG is still the second at about $390 million a year. Solomon Islands, $238 million, and Africa at $116 million. I think an interesting way to look at the program too is to look at how the influence, the potential influence of the Australian aid program, because in a sense we've got two distinct programs. One is, and this graph, which you can see on the left-hand side, is basically the total aid as a percentage of central government expenditure in recipient countries, and the bottom line being the percentage of Australian aid as a total of all donor aid. And you can see in that bottom left-hand little quadrant are the big Asian economies, where aid as a proportion of total government expenditure is quite small, and where Australia's total of that aid thing is, it varies, but it's also small. And outside that small left-hand quadrant are mainly the Pacific Island states, where aid does represent a very large part of government expenditure and where Australia is usually the dominant donor. So within those figures, there's quite a different story to tell. I think, as many of you would intuitively know, but thought it'd be useful to show you that graph. In terms of the sectoral allocation of Australian aid, governance is the largest sector. I mean, governance is a very broad remit. It's law and order, it's economic management, it's public sector reform, it's civil society, everything else. But under the previous government, that increased quite substantially. This current government is now looking to reduce governance as a proportion of the program, and you'll see some recent increases in some of the service delivery sectors, education, health and infrastructure. Again, reflecting the focus of this new government. And this new government, of course, has made a number of important policy pronouncements since it came into power. The first is a commitment to reach 0.05% of GNI by 2015, further advancing us up on Minar's graph. And this has been reaffirmed in recent statements by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, and I think that's really important given the current environment that both the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister has reaffirmed that commitment. They've re-emphasised the importance of the MDGs, of poverty reduction, of people-centred development, health, education, water supply and sanitation, disability and climate change. They still have a very strong Asia-Pacific focus, but they're also keen to re-engage with Africa. But they've also said they just don't want just a bigger aid program, they want a better aid program. And I think, as we'll see, increased scrutiny of the results of the aid program as volumes increase, and particularly as pressures mount on other domestic portfolios because of the global financial crisis.